Hey, gang, welcome back. It's good to have you back with us for another episode of the podcast that reboots your thinking about farming, ranching, food systems, and the people that are operate them. Ranching Reboot. I'm your host, Brian Alexander. You can find me on social media as Red Hills Rancher on just about every platform, including YouTube, where you can also find video versions of this podcast. You can also watch that same video version on Spotify. For those of you that have been listening since the first of the year, you'll know this season of Ranching Reboot is sponsored by Land Trust, the Outdoor Recreation Access Network. Spring turkey season is wrapping up across the plains in the Midwest, so it's time to start planning your fall and winter hunts. And with Land Trust Plus and Draw Insurance, you can book with peace of mind that if you don't draw tags, you can get a refund on your trip. No matter what kind of hunting or outdoor recreation you're looking for, Land Trust has something for you. Check out everything at landtrust.com/reboot or just click the link in the show notes. For today's podcast, we're going to head down to Northeast Texas and visit a fairly new operator with a great vision for the future. We're going to talk about some of the challenges we're facing in agriculture today, lack of labor, land conversion, and some of the ways that we can navigate a path forward. Please welcome John Rhodes to the show. Hi, John. How are you today, man?
I'm doing well, Brian. Thanks for having me. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good. Thanks for being here. I'd be doing a lot better if I catch some more rain.
Yeah, I wish we could share some with you, man. We've actually had the wettest spring that I've had since I've been here in the last 6 years. So almost a little too much, but a good problem to have.
Yeah, it is. So, where's your farm at?
We are located in Quitman, Texas. It's kind of northeast, East Texas, where the post oak savanna meets the piney woods. Um, I have a small little family farm that I'm very blessed to live on with my wife and my daughter. I have your kind of typical 40 mama cow herd that my brother and I play around with and get a lot of enjoyment working together through that. I also have, independent of that, a small sheep herd that I'm building and raise pigs out in the woods to feed my family and other neighbors that are interested.
And you got some bees too, don't you?
Yeah, I've got one hive. I'm kind of playing around with that. I started off with two last year. One of them didn't make it over the winter. So I can't really say it's an industry or anything, but maybe hoping to go that way with it at some point.
Okay. It's just enough honey for you and your family.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm hoping so. We haven't actually harvested the honey. We were, letting the hive get established last year, and we're hoping to look at it here in a few weeks and see if we can take some out of it at the end of June.
I don't know a whole lot about beekeeping.
Yeah, me either, man. My tendency is just to, if I'm curious about something, is to just dive in and make a bunch of mistakes along the way.
I don't like getting stung.
Yeah,
I'm
who
not
does?
allergic. I just don't like pain.
I understand, man. I understand. There's some good medicine in it, though. That venom therapy, I think it's kind of good for you in small doses if you aren't allergic.
Yeah, like, isn't there something like maybe bee stings can help with certain kinds of inflammation and joint pain?
That's what I've heard. I don't have any experience with that yet, but I certainly have heard that. Absolutely.
Well, you also hear that, when you get shocked by an electric fence, it might suck first off, but, everything's all kind of nice and limber the next day or two. I mean, I'm not saying I go like grab my electric fences on purpose, but we all get shocked every once in a while.
Man, I get shocked 2 or 3 times a day, it seems like. I'm moving the cows every day with the poly wire, and it's never fun. It's always mildly upsetting, but it is what it is. It's part of the process. I don't like it. Every once in a while, I'll catch one of those big shocks. I was walking around with a cattle panel in my hand one day and accidentally bumped up to the fence. And I felt it in my heart. I've had a couple of those, but I don't know what to say what would happen if somebody had like heart issues or something and that happened to them.
But what kind of chargers do you use?
I have Stay Fix out there, and then I have like some tractor supply solar stuff that I use as well.
Those
What are you
stay.
thinking out there, man?
I've got a couple of speed rights, but most of my energizers are Taylor Cyclops, either two
Okay.
and a half or 5 joule.
Those things will pack a punch, don't they?
There's different shocks. Like, it feels way different getting shocked by a speed right than it does getting nailed by a Cyclops. It man,
Cyclops make your butt pucker. Like, what's going on with it, man?
it's like I'd say that, like, the speed ride is it's like a softer shock,
Sure.
and the the shock that you get from the Cyclops it's like sharper and angrier and more prickly. Like it makes you mad.
Makes you cuss a little bit more. I cuss every time, man.
Well, we used to have these chargers that were called IntelliShocks, and they came out of Germany.
Okay.
And like you haven't been able to get them for probably 20 years. They were hot, real hot, and they clicked super fast. They're like way faster than a Taylor Cyclops. And I think what happened was like there's a frequency to the shock. Like the I think the government said you can only shock so fast, and that made a lot of them change their design. I remember getting hit by one of those old Intel shocks. I think it was a 5 joule charger, and I just tested it at 13.2.
Ooh. Ouch.
And I was working on the fence, and I just shifted my weight a little bit, and I felt the wire touch my hip. And when you have enough time to feel it touch you before you get a shock, sometimes you can get out of the way.
For sure.
Not this time.
How many pulses was that intelligence sending out a second, you think? Couple?
I don't know. I think that was probably a pulse between every quarter and every half second, and I think the Taylor Cyclops runs about 2/3 to 3/4 of a second per pulse. So it's I feel like the Intel shocks were faster. I mean, don't have one to test and don't have the equipment. I'm not smart enough to know how to operate it even if I did, but I've been shocked by enough. Like they're faster. The old ones were faster.
Gotcha.
But anyway, I felt that wire just touch my hip. And you have that split second in your head go, oh, that's the electric fence wire that's touching me. This is not going to feel good. It felt like it felt like somebody hit me in the hip with a 2x4, not a 2x4, a telephone pole. Like
Wow.
just hauled off and whacked me. That shock hit, all your muscles contract and get weird. I think I lost about 2 seconds of time because I'm on the ground on my back, like kind of a little twitchy, and dad's coming over. He's like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And I'm like, starting to get up. Like, yeah, yeah, just that didn't feel great. And
Were you standing like on moist ground or something to make that especially, in that moment, or is it just that's how
dr-
they are?
dry sand is just how they are. I was I was probably 12 feet from the ground rod, if that helps.
Okay. 13.2 is hot, man. We don't ever have fences like that out here.
Oh, I mean, if I can't make a fence, 8,000 volts. That's my cutoff.
I'm
Eight
with you.
thousand. If I'm under 8,000 volts, I've got a wire problem. Generally, between 5 and 8, it's going to be a conductivity problem. Like I'll have a rusty spot that I'll have to go patch out.
Right.
5,000 is usually a ground. Like between 3 and 5 is usually a ground for me. Uh, just like running through some brush or something, and the wires cut through the bark of the brush, and it's going to ground that way, or it's on like a fence post, or we've had insulated tube, get shorted out. But if it's 1,000, or like that's a direct short to ground. It's definitely on a metal post. So it's
I don't have any trouble keeping my cattle in with ours run from about 6 to 8. We have an offset high tensile that goes around the perimeter of the property. It's definitely got some issues. It should be a little bit hotter than that, but cows are fine, but the sheep, they won't honor that at all. I also have a solar setup I'll run a 2-line setup for my cows and sheep because I run them together as a flirt. And I was having the ewes would respect the line, but the rams, for whatever reason, were going under. And so I just put a solar charger on the bottom line and kept that bottom line especially hot. And then attached the one that goes the perimeter offset. I attached the top one to the top line, and it sits at about 6, but that bottom one's at about 10, and it works.
usually 5.5 to 6 will turn a cow.
Yeah, for sure.
Anything
Let
under
something very
5,
simple.
they don't care about it.
Yeah, for sure.
And if it kind of stays in that 5 to 6,000, that just barely hot enough range for long enough, they'll learn that they can walk through it and it doesn't hurt that bad. So
So what's
why
next? We're at the Red Hills for you, man. Did you say you were receiving some cattle?
supposed to be having some cattle land tomorrow as we record this. So it would have been last Friday when most people hear it.
Okay.
Just trying to get the custom graze going.
Okay. I didn't know
Uh,
if you were going to roll that way with the drought going on. And, in previous episodes, I had heard you and Tanya talking about traveling and doing some podcasts on the road and stuff like that. And, so I didn't know exactly where you were at.
we're going to try to get to that this fall.
Okay.
It looks like, based on the rain we've had, the climate we've got, I pulled my stocking numbers down just a little bit, and I told clients to expect to go home in August.
Okay.
That's all I'm promising right now is about a 90-day deal. Just simply we're in D3. We don't have the rain. I mean, we've had an inch and a half of rain, maybe 2 inches total since the first of the year. Not a not a tremendous amount to grow grass on.
Right.
Um, Soil temps they're getting close to warm season grass where it's going to start kicking off. Cool season is still going pretty good. We're getting good growth from the moisture we have, but it's thin. So going,
What's your cool season stuff that y'all have up there?
pardon,
Just what's the cool season stuff that you grow on your farm?
like a lot of cheats, like bromes, things like that.
All our ryegrass is heading up and seeding out over here. The Bermuda and the Bahia and stuff like that's turning on underneath. So we're in that kind of liminal space. I think it's a good time for a cow, though, for sure. They're out there getting fat. Everything's going really well.
And we're starting
You
to
did
get,
end up selling your herd, though, right? Like your Corrientes and stuff.
yes, I did.
Okay.
Uh, and for those out there in podcast land that might be wondering about that. So, couple fortunate things. The gentleman that I take cattle for on my south end, he lives about an hour south of me down in Oklahoma.
Okay.
He ended up buying a group of like 9 party girl types, like home raised heifers that were bred back to that were exposed to another bull, not their dad, um, that caught at 14 months old.
Okay. Well done.
Yep. He got a hold of 9 of those, and I'm going to get those back either tomorrow or this weekend, or maybe next week, whenever he can get them gathered up along with another probably 160 of his things. Um, another buddy I've been running with that stocks my east side. He bought quite a few of my heifers. He bought some of my steers to put into his beef program, so I know
Okay.
where they're at. But the bulk of them, um, well, in late 2020, I bought a bunch. Bought a load off of Josh and Gwen Hoy over in the Flint Hills, my good friends. And those are some really good cows. I think I got 32 or 33 from them then. They ended up buying back uh, 34 cows from me, and they got 17 of their cows back that I bought from them in 2020. So,
We're keeping it in the family up there, eh?
yeah. I mean, Josh and
That's
I were
cool.
just joking. We'll just trade these cows back and forth every 3 or 4 years. No big deal. And I guess the joke is, it's kind of like, two guys could get stranded on a desert island and get rich selling coconuts to each other using sand as currency. That's kind of what it feels like. Josh and I trading these cows back together.
I got you. That's cool, man. I love that custom grazing business model, but it seems you need to be kind of networked and have a little bit of a name. I just don't know many people, at least I wouldn't, that would send like just, all their cows to somebody they didn't know or didn't really have any, reputation of sorts. So
Yeah, I can see that. Um, but I, I don't know how to feel about that, John. Um, it
what?
seems like that, anytime a piece of ground changes hands around here,
Mhm.
before the ink is dry on the sales contract, everybody that owns cows around here that doesn't have enough grass is calling that guy and like, "Hey, can I rent your grass? Can I rent your grass?"
Yep.
So it's not necessarily, I don't think there's that much of a problem, at least in my area, if you have grass, finding somebody to put cows on it.
Right.
I don't think that's too much of a problem. But like you said, having that reputation and those contacts helps you find the right people. I I got fortunate because my dad was already in the custom grazing business and he just turned a bunch of his contacts over to me. And that really helped me get started.
Right.
And I also had all that institutional knowledge of how do we work with people, in this kind of client customer relate or, in this kind of client relationship. How
Right.
do we work with these people in order to keep them happy and coming back year after year after year and paying premium?
Yeah, here for me, I've been all that rings true. And I'm making assumptions here. I've never really gone out and tried to sell some grass because I never really had any to sell until recently. I just signed a lease yesterday on 120 acres that I'm figuring out what to do with. Of course, I wouldn't enter into a relationship without having like a foundation to work with what I think I'm going to do over there. But I look forward to talking to you about it a little bit, seeing what's up.
Well, tell me about it.
Well, sure, man. It's 120 acres. It's about 10 minutes from my farm, which is great. Um, it's got really good, or let me rephrase that. It's got capable enough a perimeter fence, ponds, and quite a few cross fences, some stock tanks in each pond. And then there's some piped water too up by the house and around the barn and stuff, but not everywhere. I'm very blessed on my current farm where I live that it was plug and play when I moved here. My dad bought it in 2012 and wanted to, do something in his early retirement and totally set this place up. It was pretty set up to begin with when he purchased it, but then he really put his own mark on the place. And so we have, water troughs in every little field and woven wire fence around with an offset electric. And it's just really dialed in. So this new place is going to give me an opportunity to develop some skills on and kind of put some water in, possibly do things like that, kind of develop it a little bit more, which I need to cultivate those skills because it's not something I've really ever done before.
Over design your water system.
Yeah.
I that would be like the number one thing I would say is water system, over design it. Like whatever you think your maximum carrying capacity on that property would be for livestock, figure out the water demand for that and then double it.
Okay.
Then build that and that's what you build. Because I've got my water systems are all over 20 years old by now. And when dad designed them, he designed them twice as big as he thought he needed them.
And
And
that worked
just
well for you.
and now they're just barely big enough. Now that we've got the ranch cleaned up, got grass productivity coming back up, we barely have half the water that we need.
Wow.
So I'm trying to figure out how to get my water systems upgraded and add some more capacity so I can run more head. Cause I'm kind of almost at a limit watered out. Well, I would be watered out if I had a normal year. I mean, normal rainfall year, I can run more cattle than I can water on my grass.
And
Hasn't
you just
really
have,
been that much of a problem during this drought.
so do you have like big water troughs and piped water throughout the farm or in just little parts and some stock ponds or what?
We have between the three different grazing cells, there are 14 pits and ponds that dad built through the late 80s and 90s.
Okay.
I've got a major creek that runs down the east side of the ranch. It starts on the south side. It runs down the east side. And that's the one is full of beavers. Two major beaver colonies on the
So it's
north
got
end of that
water in
creek.
it year round.
Oh yeah. Okay. I mean, D3 drought, I can go down to that creek and there's more water in it now than there was a year ago. And there's more water a year ago than there was two. They just they just keep adding, like they'll add 6 inches to all of their dams over a winter. Like, okay, 6 inches isn't much. Well, if they're there 4 years, that's 2 feet. That's two more
Sure.
feet of extra water you've got in that canyon. And you can't buy that.
Are there any negatives besides them chewing down trees or whatever that you've seen in your context of having those beavers, man? Or is it
Um,
all just positives as far as you see it?
as far as I see it, it's all positives. What are the negatives to when beavers dam up a creek? They make it wider. They make it harder to get across.
You're right.
This creek, I call it Stewards Creek. It runs for, let's just call it 2.5 miles. It starts on the ranch about a half mile south of the highway and kind of runs straight north and goes off the property onto the neighbor. It I forgot where I was going with that.
Talking about beavers. I
Oh,
was talking about positives and negatives of the beavers.
so the only negative that I can see to the beavers is they've dammed up the creek, and I can't get across that creek anymore because
Got
two of the places they dammed it up were two of the places that 10 years ago I was using as a crossing. Now I can't cross the creek, but that's okay
right.
because the state built a fantastic culvert over that creek, and I can use that. It's a public highway. So that's how I get across that creek. I don't worry about crossing it anywhere else on the 2 miles. Is that inconvenient as hell when I gotta go all the way to the north end to work on a water gap? Yes. It's
But worth it.
it's worth it when I look at the water that's impounded on that creek, when I look at the habitat, when I go down there and I see fish that are 18 inches long in a dang beaver pond.
What kind of fish are floating instead of swimming around in there, man?
I've I've caught bass and hybrid bluegill in my beaver
Okay.
ponds.
Oh, yeah. That's awesome.
Uh, just a little over a year ago, I think it was last July, Chip Flory from AgriTalk came out
Okay.
as came out with Land Trust to make some content, and we stopped down there at my Middle Crossing beaver ponds. Now, I'm not a fisherman, okay? Like, I used to like to fish before I quit drinking, because then fishing was an excuse to go sit in a boat with your buddies and drink beer. Like, that's what fishing was. It wasn't
I
actually going fishing, it was just, "I'm gonna go sit in a boat with my buddies and drink beer for 3 hours."
think that's a lot of deer camp for people.
Well, when I quit drinking, I remember going fishing and, like, cast and reel in for an hour and nothing happened. That's okay when you're drinking with your buddies, but
Right.
when you're not drinking and you're kinda by yourself, it's boring as shit. So, I kinda I don't fish very much. So when these guys were out, we were down there and, uh, I forget who it was. I think it was Tom handed me a fishing pole and was like, "Ah, go over there and just throw it in and see what happens." So I took this fishing pole, this tiny little spinner bait over there and just tossed it into the beaver pond. Within 2 seconds, I had a fish on. Pulled it out, took the fish off, put it back in the water, cast out again. Less than 2, like, the lure hit the water and I had a fish on it.
Okay.
Pulled him out, let him go, cast again. As soon as the lure hit the water, third fish hit it. 3 in a row. Like,
Perch,
okay,
probably.
uh, no, I think all 3 of them were bass, actually,
Okay, cool.
little ones.
Mhm.
But, that kinda makes fishing fun.
Yeah, for sure. I love small pond fishing when it's like that, man.
Okay, so back to water.
Sure.
We got those 14 ponds, got the Great Creek on the east side, 2 beaver complexes. The creeks on the west side, we're still working on trying to restore them. Might be able to put a project together this year to put together a couple of different money sources and be able to go in there and finish rehabilitating that creek and get the rest of the trees off of it. Um, so water systems, gosh, let's see. I've got seven wells. 5 of them are solar. 2 of them are grid tied. No, I've got 8. 5 solars and 3 grid tied wells. And one of my solar wells it's kind of a hybrid. It's also tied into the grid tied pump. So during the day, my solar panels should be pumping most of the water. And then at night, if I still got to pump water, we're still tied onto the grid. Or if, it doesn't, or if we have enough days where it's not sunny, I can still pump water on the grid. I've got 3 systems that are solar pumped storage.
Okay.
So, one of them, the tank is just kinda sitting there by the well, so it doesn't generate a whole lot of pressure head to pump anywhere else, but it is storage, 10,000 gallons.
Uh,
I've got another one, on my east side. Well, Actually, both of them are on the east side. I've got two 20,000-gallon storage facilities for water on my east side. One of them we're pumping almost 190 feet uphill, and the other one we're pumping about 130 feet uphill.
That's a scale that's hard for me to imagine out here on my little 200-acre piece. Yeah. Having water tanks that big and a ranch that big to drive around. It's awesome, man. We had a what I call snowmageddon, an apocalyptic snow event for our area a couple of years ago, and lost power, and didn't have any power. I mean, water for our animals. Luckily, I have a valve I can turn and tap into the city water, and use that when I have to. But I just couldn't believe the water bill that I got after that. These cows drink a lot of water, man.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, rural water, there isn't rural water where I'm at, where the ranch is. I have it here at my house, but we're 7 miles away and almost 200 foot downhill from the ranch where I live. And, um, let me think for a second. Let me think for a second, because my dad helped put the system in the early '80s, a rural water system, and his cousin is actually the operator and has been the operator since it was put in the '80s. I mean, Mace knows where all the valves are. He
Wow.
knows where all the lines are because he was there when most of them were put in the ground.
He's a well of knowledge, so to speak.
Um, he Mace is also one of the guys that taught me how to witch. So he'll get out there with his witching sticks, and he'll just go follow the lines and get them all marked with his witching sticks. It's pretty cool to watch. If you've never
What's his success rate on that? To be a good one, you have to be like 90 and above or something, 90% and above.
uh, I don't know. That's hard. That's How would you define success?
Is that something that, I mean, I've witnessed this once. We had a family ranch in Graham, Texas that my grandparents owned, and much drier out there and stuff. And we dug a well and they brought a witcher out. And I'm curious, as somebody who does a lot of meditation and things like that, when they're using those witcher sticks, is it all in the willow stick, or are they bringing some sort of energy to it, or what? Have you ever dove deep with any of those guys and ask them how they do it?
How I do it, so I made 2 copper rods.
Okay.
I've got copper rods, they're too long. I need to shorten them because they're kinda heavy in the
Sure.
hands. Uh, I can use I can do it with a coat hanger. I can pick up 2 sticks on the ground and kinda do it. I don't know how it works. I can't explain it.
I hear you.
But
It's very interesting stuff,
I
man.
mean, you pick up this I pick up my sticks and I just kinda, like, focus in my head
Mhm.
of what I'm looking for. Like, I
Right.
want to find buried lines. I want to find and follow a buried line in the ground.
And you feel that in your finger, it kinda, like, toggles on the end or something like that? How does it work? Or how does the copper rod one work? I've only seen willow sticks that work.
I don't think I feel anything inside. It's
Okay.
just I feel the rods moving and twisting in my hands, and depending on
Mhm.
how they cross and which way they swing, right, would tell me I'm either left or I'm too far right and I need to turn. Does that make any sense?
Sure, absolutely, absolutely.
So if I can find a line and I start following it, they'll stay crossed. And if you
Okay,
start to veer off one side or the other, the sticks will start to tell you.
okay, interesting. If I remember correctly, and I could be remembering this wrong because I was like a little kid, but I remember them having like a willow stick, and the end they would kind of pull it apart a little kind of bit, and then the end would pop down whenever there was water, they getting close to water underground. So does that sound about right? Or have you not seen that
I've
approach?
seen that. I've never tried that approach. The only
Okay,
thing I've ever tried is 2 sticks.
I got
And
you.
that anybody that I ever remember seeing when I was younger that was good,
Hmm.
they'd use 2 metal rods or 2 metal rods generally.
Okay.
I mean, you can take a piece of 14 gauge fence. I've done it with a piece of 14 gauge fence wire. Just made some real quick with my pliers.
Wow,
I
that's cool stuff, man.
how accurate is it? Okay.
Did you get some verification? I mean, did you know you were following a water line and your sticks were indicating that? Or have you ever like gone out and looked for like, some actual water and then dug down and found and verified what your sticks were telling you?
Mm, I, I mean, if you know the water line is there,
Mhm.
like I know there's a water line here somewhere. I know it generally runs north south.
Right.
That's one that's kind of an easy thing because then you kind of walk a grid east west until you go over it and you find it. And once you
Right.
find it, you mark where that spot was. To me, what I found works for me is when they come in and cross and they make they both come in at a 45 and they meet at a 90 degrees where my toes are, that's going to be where the thing is.
Yeah.
Not where my heels, where my toes are. That's going to be where it's at.
All right. It's cool, man. It's just I love intuitive stuff like that that there's really not any explanation for.
Well,
Interesting.
I was just sitting here thinking like maybe that might be something to make some video of.
Definitely.
But then, okay, what are you going to video? You walk around with a couple sticks? Well, then you got to put in like, okay, we're actually going to dig a hole here and prove that what I said is here is here.
Yeah, or you could go where you just display the water line thing and kind of show you like, no, there's a water line there and like kind of show the action of the rods over that. I think that'd be good content, man. I think you should do
Well, I've also it's also kind of fun like to walk around in town, in a yard in town
it.
and be like, "Oh, there's something here." And you put a little flag down on the ground where that was, and you just kind of walk a grid and you go back and look at your flags and you're like, "Okay, well, there's a line here. Let's follow that." And then you get on that line, you follow it, and you come up to the gas meter at the house. You're like, "Oh crap, I was just following a gas line."
Right.
Then you go find another one and it's like, "Oh, that's a fiber optic cable I was just following. Well, that's interesting."
So that thing's finding all kinds of different line. I mean, it's not keying in on the water. You think it's like, I mean, if it's finding a gas line, that's and pressurized gas running through there. So I wonder what it signals it to kind of make it, respond.
I
I always thought it was like the water, but maybe
the
it's something else.
the things that I feel competent to find and trace are generally
Mhm.
pipes and underground things, like
Okay.
pipes and cables underground. I feel pretty comfortable tracing those out with my witching sticks.
That's
Find a water well, find an oil well. I don't know. I've never tried. I mean, I d I guess I don't have like 10 or $15,000 worth of trust in my skills to say, "There's water here, go dig a well."
Did somebody coach you up on the sticks, or did you just watch other people and dive in and try it yourself?
I just watched other people, and one day I was just like,
I can do this.
"That looks like bullshit. I'm gonna try that."
Hey,
But then, when you're just walking and I try to tell people, like, just fix in your mind what you're looking for and then just look straight ahead. Don't look at the ground. Just look straight ahead. Don't look at where I mean, you obviously have to look at where you're walking, but just
right.
look straight ahead, concentrate on what you're trying to find.
Visualize water in your head or whatever.
Maybe visualize
A pipe. Yep.
a
Gotcha.
pipe with fluid throwing through it, going through it, or a cable. That's what I try to do.
Mhm.
And then I just walk, try to walk straight lines and feel it. And
Yeah.
you feel it in the hands.
Yeah, man.
You'll feel those rods twist and start to come together.
Is there any other weird, subtle, sensory things when like the rods come together or anything like that that you're feeling or not?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think
Gotcha.
so.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's like it's a very subtle thing that's below our perception, like below our conscious perception, but our subconscious is still able to pick up like signals and interpret things. And what those things are, I have no idea. But I I, I think that's how it works.
There's a lot of that going on in our world for sure.
And that kind of like makes me think about the difference between holistic thinking and reductionist thinking. So those of us that are in regenerative agriculture that think holistically, a lot of those people just heard me talk about witch and sticks for the last, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes. And they're like, okay, maybe I'll give that a shot. The people that are on the other side, on the reductionist science side, they can't understand it because they don't have faith that it works.
Mhm.
We've got to
Faith in
reduce
the
this.
deal. Part of
We've
it.
got to reduce this down. We've got to take all these variables out. And we've got to figure out how this works so we can replicate it.
Right. I'm with
Good luck.
So, man, I'm trying to think about different business models on this lease, and I have no idea what a custom day rate goes for. You know, the research that I've done is like $2, $2.25 a head, something like that. In the our area, is that what about over where you're at?
This is a question I really don't like to answer.
Okay. Well, I won't hold you to it, man. I'm just curious. I'm trying to get an idea what it looks like throughout the area.
Yeah, and I get that. Um, I've told people for quite a while to look for $2 a
Okay.
day per standard animal unit. You're probably not going to get it.
Okay.
I mean, buck and a half per, per day per standard animal unit, I think is very robust. And, of course, that scales down. Like for yearlings, you might charge a little bit extra on the SAU basis because of consumption, because they're a pain in the ass to deal with, because they're always on the highway. Like a fall calving herd that's going to be easier to take care of. Maybe you'll cut that rate down a little lower because they're less workload, not as much of a pain in the ass.
Right.
But I think that's a place to start.
And then you negotiate mineral and medicine and all that sort of stuff, I guess, on the who pays for all that, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you're getting $2 a day,
You might have
but minerals coming out of your pocket, medicine's coming out of your pocket, all the day help, anything's coming out of your pocket, $2 a day might not be enough.
right.
If you're getting $1 a day and they're sending somebody up twice a week with feed and mineral to put it out for the cows, and all you have to do is just make sure the water's there and the fence is hot and open a gate every couple of days, maybe $1 a day is a little more worth it. So
It all depends on what you got going on. Yes. I think it's a great model, man, to get into it with.
it- but it's just such a complicated thing. It's like, well, what do you get a day for custom grazing? Well, let's talk about what your operation is first. Like, what's your structure? Do you own the land, or are you leasing the land and really having to maximize your cash flow? Like, what kind of arrangement are you going to be doing? What class of critter are we talking about? You know, if you've got to calve out heifers and they're expecting 100% of their calf crop, and you're going to get docked for every calf that's not there, is that worth $2 a day? I don't know.
Yeah. I don't think that's the cost of entry looks, is great and everything on that. But just me being relatively new to this industry, I've only been doing this since 2019. And so I'm kind of in this little intermediate stage. My passion and the love that I've cultivated for this kind of drives me. But I still have a lot to learn, absolutely. I do. But I just don't, I'm also a bit of a hermit. So not really networked. I'm not going to Sunday school and seeing all the old timers there every week and all that sort of stuff, which is, kind of important in my little area in order to make those relationships and stuff. So just kind of figuring it out as I go. I want to kind of use that place I want to be a good steward to it. I don't want to take it backwards in any form or fashion. That's important to me. So, but I would like to kind of get my hands on my own hay, nothing crazy, but just have control of that. And so I was thinking about haying it and putting all our hay in the barn. And then I was going to wanted to talk to you or see if you knew somebody that I could talk to about natural hay production. Like, would I be able to feasibly bring in my cows behind that hay cutting and do right by the land, as far as like fertilization needs? Just say maybe I did one cutting a year. Could I get my fertilization needs and take care of the land properly with the cow herd just rotating behind that? Have you have any experience with that?
No, I don't. Because, and I'll tell you why.
Sure.
The reason my ranch is native range is because it was too steep and too rough to farm.
Understood.
And
Gotcha.
anything out here that was flat enough to be farmed, they
Yep.
farmed it, including a lot of the hilltops. I would say that from the time this ranch was settled, like in the late 1880s, 1890s is when this was opened up for homesteading,
Mhm.
until my family started to acquire it about 110 years ago. Let's say there was probably 600 acres of farm ground on this whole property at peak. And by the 50s, that was cut in half. And then my dad got rid of the last of it in the late 80s. But I can still go to places where it was farmed, like before the 30s, before they said everybody's got to put terraces in everywhere and see a lot of erosion.
Okay.
Um, so I don't have any experience with that, but I would think that you would get quite a bit of fertility back grazing after a hay crop. So
Right.
of course, it's making sure the grass has enough rest and it's ready to be regrazed,
For
and then
sure.
having the appropriate stocking rate to get across it
Yeah, it seems like you'd have to stack
in the
them
right amount of time.
that thorough, get that thorough fertilization. You have to kind of keep them dense in there, it seems like.
Okay, so this question came up. I think it was in a Facebook group a couple days ago
Okay.
about, has anybody done any study about fertility? Well, the question was, how much fertility are your cows really bringing?
Right.
Okay, and this is a question that keeps coming up every once in a while. So I think it was like 2019, 2020. I did some math. Now I'm not good at math, but what I came up with, and I found three studies that talked about what the fertilizer value in bovine manure was. Now, I got to say that all three of these studies were basically done in a confinement type operation
Okay.
where the manure and urine are getting kind of mixed together in a pit. Okay. So for starters, that's the first problem because there's a big difference between manure and urine that are mixed together in a pit that undergoes what's called anaerobic decomposition,
Sure.
decomposition without air. And that's going to lead to different decomposition products in that liquid manure than if you had urine landing on rangeland 2 feet away from where manure was landing on rangeland. Okay. They're going to break down different. So I'm not going to pretend like these numbers are good. These numbers are a or would be a good starting point for somebody a lot smarter than me to start doing this research. So based on the obviously flawed data set that I had available to me, because let's face it, how are we going to get a data set of what's coming out of a cow that would be falling on rangeland, and how are we going to quantify the NPK in that?
Right.
Well, okay, reductionist thinking. We've got to collect all of that stuff. Okay, so let's just collect all of it and then measure all of it and divide it by the number of cows, and we'll figure that out that way. Okay, well, when you're collecting all of it in a pit, you're changing, like, you're changing the rules that biology is operating
Absolutely. Yeah.
on. Okay, so moving on, and I probably could go find the folder where all this math is at. But what I figured was, if you're grazing at 50,000 pounds per acre stock density,
Okay.
okay, so like
That's not
50,
too crazy. But
50 cows on an acre for a day.
yeah.
It's not that bad. It's not
Mhm.
not real crazy. It's nothing like what Hobbs is doing. You know,
No.
50,000 pounds an acre is, I think, is a stocking rate that almost everybody can work with from the plains east.
Right. I'm with you.
Mountains, western plains, like look at 25,000. That's the better place to start.
Right.
Anyway, 50,000 pounds an acre. Just breaking down the NPK that's in the manure, not even looking at the carbon that's, the bypass carbon, the bypass protein, none of that. Just looking at the NPK and the volume of NPK that comes out of the back of a cow, 50 to $55 an acre. And that was 2020 prices.
Wow.
And that's what it was worth to put that amount of NPK on your soil, was about 50 to $55 an acre. So when you're faced with the choice, like, okay, I have 120 acres I need to fertilize. Do I do that with cows over 21 days,
Right.
or do I just call the spray man and I have him come do it in 1 day?
Here.
That that's the equation.
Mhm.
And I get that it takes some creativity to plan a high 21 day high impact graze cycle. And if we're talking about, like, I'm just going to throw some dates out, like first cutting be mid-June,
Sure. Late May, mid-June, just depends on the weather conditions here, but yeah, for sure.
late May, mid-June, probably going to need
Mhm.
14 to 21 days of that of rest on that grass before it's
Right,
ready to be regrazed. So now we're
right.
looking at third week of June or first part of July.
Bring the
Plan
cows on. Yep.
bring your cows on, plan that for 21 days, then they leave, and maybe another 20 days later, sometime in late August, beginning of September, maybe try to pull a second cutting off.
I guess the only thing that I can do is experiment and, do some soil tests, I guess, and see what happens. So I am obligated and just, I can't run land backwards, man. I don't care. It just doesn't feel good to me. I'm in this to improve lands. It's important to me to get out there and do a good job. And I'm just trying to shop around, see what makes sense and how to.
I'll, I'll also say this, when you hay a pasture, that can be that can be pretty bad. That can be pretty detrimental to the soil health because you're taking a lot of biomass off.
For sure.
If it's a hay field that's been hayed every year for the last 40 years, yeah, that could be a problem.
Mhm.
Or it's already kind of like in an equilibrium of crappy health that it's just not going to get a whole lot worse the more, with successive hayings. There was there's a couple spots on the ranch that I had some prairie hay swathed and baled 4 years ago.
Okay.
Never had it tested because that wasn't the point. The point was, if we're covered up with snow, I've got these cows, I can haul them protein, but they're gonna need some bulk.
Insurance
What's
policy. Sure.
and
Mhm.
what's the best bulk that I can have? The bulk of the stockpile that I already have.
There we go.
So I'll take an area where I can't graze it, we'll hay it, and then I can take that biomass and I can move it where I need it to. And if I end up not feeding that hay, it'll already be there at the quarry when we need to go reclaim ground, which
Right. Right.
probably get
Mhm.
to do some of that this year. Um, Probably gonna do
We
some of that
definitely
this
do a little bit of haying each year or whenever it makes sense.
year. That was the first and last time that I've cut any hay on the ranch.
Okay.
So if I'm
I've never done it before. I've always, like I said, I'm relatively new to this, and it's just a no-no in the regenerative kind of model for the most part. Is you want to import other people's fertility to your land. So I just hadn't done it. I think my place here could take it. I've got some really nice pastures here in my home farm. Not talking about the lease right now. I figure I could probably do 20 acres of hay and then like do a different 20 next year and do that over the course of 10 years and get the whole place done, at some point and it not go backwards. But I've just never experimented with it. I just never have. So
I just anecdotally from my observations, it did take quite a while to recover.
you did.
Yep. It took quite a while to recover. But now 4 years later, I can't go there and I can't find an edge
That's great.
where they swathed other than where he went through a little bit of brush and like cut through a cut through a brush thicket and there's just still a line through there. Other than that, I really can't tell a difference between what was hayed and what hasn't. And that hasn't had any fire, any grazing other than maybe a few stray head here and there that that just wander into the quarry. But it's not it took a while to recover. Did the land look as healthy the next year after it was hayed in 21? No, it didn't. But we've also been in a horrible drought, so it's taken longer to recover. Now where we're at 4 years, three full growing seasons after that, like I said, I can't tell a difference.
The lease that I have where I am planning on doing the hay has been hayed twice a year for the last 2 years, and I don't think they did anything behind it. So I have a little bit of concerns there taking it backwards. It looks really good over there. I just went over there and like rode the quad around, making sure all the fences were exactly where I needed them to be. And it looked pretty good over there. So I'm excited about having some more options. It just opens up a whole bunch more options having this extra 120 acres because we've almost reached our capacity here on the home farm. Got like probably 70 animal units out here with everything combined with the and that's just in cattle, and the sheep and everything else too. So I like to let things rest at least 45 days at the very least. This is going to open up some options. I'm excited about it.
Yeah. I need to go recycle some coffee. So let's take
Yes, sir. Go for it, man. I'll see you shortly.
Yep. One of these days I'll figure out how to sit down for 2 hours and I have to take a bathroom break. Today's not that day.
I'm with you, man. I consciously made an effort not to drink a bunch of coffee or water so I wouldn't be sitting here shaking or needing to pee after during our conversation.
I used to do that. Like the first probably year and a half. I used to do that. And then one day I heard Joe Rogan take a pee break in the middle of a podcast. I'm like, well, if Joe can do it, I can do it.
I hear you, man. It makes sense to me. It makes sense to me. What's your prep for these? Do you like eat a bunch of nootropics and get really caffeinated and what?
10 minutes before I go to the bathroom. That I don't really have much of a routine. I mean, do sound check, make sure things are going right. But as far as like a personal care routine, I mean, when I kind of realized that it's okay to stop in the middle and go take a pee if you're sitting here for
Like
2
whatever.
hours.
Yeah. So I was asking, we were talking about, organizations. And I was asking if there's an organization that I should belong to that makes sense for a producer like me.
I think RCAF. I think
Yeah.
RCAF is a great organization um, that really wants to keep the small producers in the game. That really wants to keep the small producers in the game. The independent cow calf guy, small feedlot operators, farmer feeders.
Are
All
they just lobbying for us in Washington or what services do they provide?
that's a good question. And maybe I should do an episode with the RCAF folks. A lot of advocacy in Washington, talking to policymakers. I think they're also kind of active in some states at the state level,
Gotcha.
but mostly, they fight against things like this recent EID mandate.
Okay.
That this EID rule that just got pushed through, which I kind of have some notes. So you and I could probably fly under the radar and not have to put EID tags in. Like,
The idea of it horrifies me. Being like mandated at
and
least.
yes, yes. Oh, well, we'll help you pay for it. We'll help you buy the tags. Okay, great. We're still paying for it. Doesn't matter. I mean, taxation is theft, and producers pay all the taxes. Like if you're in the service sector, if you're a consumer, like you're still not paying all the taxes. Producers pay way more tax than almost anybody else. Like
Right.
it's just crap. Lost my train of thought.
We're talking about EIDs and
EIDs, yeah. So I think EID are a great thing as long as it's not mandated.
yeah.
Because my use case was it helps me keep records so much cleaner, so much easier. I remember the days of working cattle when you would have to have somebody who was called a scribe. And the scribe was one of the most important people when you're working cattle because the scribe has to keep all the notes.
Yeah.
What animal, what tag number is bred, what tag number calved, which one didn't, which ones go to the sale. Like
That's
these,
kind
these
of our
things,
model for
I,
sure.
I mean, these things are important. So
Mhm.
records must be kept.
Yes, sir.
Well, if I've got a scale head and EID reader, I don't need a scribe.
It just logs it all for you. It'd be really cool. I could see that being very beneficial.
And I don't have to decipher what the scribe wrote. Is that a 3 or an 8?
I'm with you.
You know, what is this number here? What does this word say? What is this note? And you don't have, a whole bunch of legal pads that are caked with cow shit and dust and mud.
Right, for sure.
the way they're selling it to us is traceability. Okay, we need it for disease traceability. Fine. What about all the imported meat?
Right. Are they doing that for them?
No,
Are they for those records?
no. And that's what tells me it's a scam.
Yeah.
Because if you really care about disease traceability, you won't make the people that have the safest, most secure, healthiest beef system in the world. You're going to track our cattle, but we're not going to track the ones that are being imported from places like Nigeria, Brazil, and Argentina.
Right.
We're not going to track them for health. We're not going to have traceability on them. We barely have inspection on them. But you, American producer, we're going to inspect the hell out of your small plants. You move a cow across state lines, it's got to have this electronic tag number in it, and you got to tell us that she went across state lines. Get fucked. I'm not doing it. Like,
Yeah,
if I still had my cows, I would already cut all the EID tags out of them and thrown them away. Like that's how strongly I feel about it, because you look at what they're doing over in Europe. Like, you go back and listen to the episodes I did with Alex Jones. When they have a birth, that animal has to be tagged within 36 hours in both years, and that number gets reported to the government of what species, description, where it was born. I don't want that reality.
Yeah,
I-
me either. Me either. That's just insane. It's just, and then when they die over there in Europe, don't they come and collect the animal, or there's some like real hardcore regulations of how you get rid of it and all that, and you got to log it again.
Yeah, if I have a cow die in the pasture, I'll probably just leave it there especially if you can't see it from the road.
For sure. Complete that cycle, man. Absolutely.
But over there, I mean, coyotes got to eat too. Vultures got to eat
dude.
too.
What's
They don't-
yeah.
They've got a valuable place in the ecosystem.
Absolutely.
But when the government tells me you have to do this, and they give a reason, and we say, what about imports? They're not inspected. Are we going to trace these imports back to their point of origin for health verification for the same reason you're telling us we have to? No? Oh, why do they get a pass? Why do they
All
get
degrees is why they get a pass. Business deals have already been made, you know?
so I'm really conflicted. But I think what I would like people to understand is there are some ways that I think to get around the CID mandate. So if you're set up to where all your animals are going direct to consumer, I don't think you have to.
It makes sense. Yeah.
And if your cows never cross state lines, I don't think they have to. The
Is this
rules,
EIP like mandated, like in coming for us in the new farm bill? Is it like already passed, or are they just talking about it and like trying to?
I think this is what's coming down the line.
Yeah.
And sexually intact cattle that cross state lines.
Okay.
Okay. So there's a carve out there already for steers.
Right.
Okay. So all the steers that go to the feedlots in the out here in the plains, they're not sexually intact. So they're not going to be EID mandated. Our heifers that go, if they're not spayed, they would probably need to be EID'd. So that might cause a little bit of price disparity, might cause some interesting market fluctuations between heifer price and steer price.
I gotcha.
I just thought about that. So it's not hard and fast that every bovine in the United States is going to have EID. That's not what this rule is saying. So sexually intact cattle that cross state lines must have an EID, and direct to slaughter cattle are exempt.
Strange. You think if they're trying to trace for like diseases, if that's really their main impetus for doing that, that they would have them mandated for steers and like feedlots, because that's where the majority of your diseases are going to be, right?
That would make
What
sense.
they would not do only sexually intact animals. Can you explain that to me? You have any thoughts on that?
They're lying to us. They're lying to us. Like the only thing that makes sense is they're selling it to us saying it's got to be done for traceability and health. But we're not going to trace the steers that are going to the feedlots because they're not sexually intact and therefore can't pass on. It doesn't make any sense.
I'm with you, man. That makes
Absolutely
sense
makes
at
no
all.
sense. What does make sense about this EID mandate is it's just another control.
Yeah. Yeah.
However, they're eventually going to get it done. This is just another way for the government to exert control on the beef industry.
In Texas, probably some sort of a methane tax or some bullshit like that.
Uh, the day they want to try to put carbon tax on cows grazing on rangeland,
Mhm.
gonna be an interesting day. I mean, that makes me think about a whole giant ass can of worms that
Mhm.
I'm probably not very qualified to talk about. I mean, we're talking about carbon cycling and trying to pull emissions out of the atmosphere. Gosh, I read this article this morning just after I got up that there's a carbon capture plant going online, and their cost per ton of carbon is like $600 or $800 a ton. They're turning into rock, which okay, that's cool. A, there's no sense in hitting bullseyes if you're aiming at the wrong target.
Right, for sure.
And B, why are we investing billions in a technology with a cost of $600 to $800 a ton when we already have a technology that can sequester a lot of carbon, like properly grazing ruminant animals? We can
Absolutely.
sequester a hell of a lot of carbon in our soil. But here's the problem with soil carbon sequestration, John. Here's the problem. It pays guys like you and me. It doesn't pay a big corporation that has minimum wage employees that lawmakers and legislators can buy stock in. It doesn't make companies like that wealthy. And when it does, when they figure out which companies to invest in the carbon market, and they figure out how to write the legislation to benefit those companies, that's when we'll see carbon markets develop.
Something to look forward to.
Something to look forward to. I just hope they leave enough scraps and loopholes to where, guys like us could still make a few bucks off of it and corporate investors aren't vacuuming it all up.
You are in the carbon capture business, though, right? Are you working with a carbon capture company right now?
Yes, yes. Grassroots carbon, actually.
I tried to reach out with them, and I think you have to have a certain amount of acreage under your control. I'm getting close to that, but I think it's 500 acres or something like that. And didn't have to be contiguous, I don't think, but you had to have at least 500 acres. Does that make sense to you? Does that sound right?
Yeah. And that's something that periodically I've had conversations grassroots about. And it's not that they're trying to exclude small producers. It's just there's got to be enough storage potential there to pay for the sampling.
Yeah, yeah, makes
There's
sense.
got to be enough. There's got to be enough area there to pay for the sampling. And honestly, the sampling and verification part of it has been the hang up for probably 20 years.
So are they doing all that through soil sampling? They're not doing remote sensing? I thought it was more of a remote sensing thing.
I don't trust remote sensing for carbon. I
Okay.
don't. I haven't seen it. It's really hard for me to believe that you're going to take data from a satellite, just looking at the surface of the ground, and you're going to be able to have a meaningful inference of how many tons per acre of carbon that land is sequestering. That's really hard for me to believe. Okay, we can measure some things like moisture quantity, moisture in the soil. We can measure that from a satellite. And we know that soil organic matter and water holding capacity of the soil have a direct relationship.
Right.
But what's that? How much different is that relationship between Van Horn, Texas and Des Moines, Iowa?
It seems like they could probably remote sense carbon release, like when you till up a field or something pretty easily. But I see your point on like measuring what's in the ground from there.
And I, there's several other carbon companies out there that are not doing actual ground measurements. Those are the companies I would not want to work with. I would want to work with a company that actually measures what's in the ground and isn't just doing some magic wizard high-tech thing with a satellite and a computer algorithm.
That
Get your
nobody can
ass out
verify
there,
except for them.
get your ass out there, pull soil cores, and tell me what's really there.
Yeah.
Because
So
if you're
they
just
came
doing
out to your farm and y'all pulled soil samples, and they'll do that every year and just kind of compare and contrast. Is that it?
so with grassroots, the way it works is you go through the process. Um, you start at grassrootscarbon.com/reboot and you start the process. If you're a good fit, like you said, you do have to have some acres put together. And
For
that's
sure.
just, they can't waste their time going out and trying to put together an 80-acre project that's storing a ton and a half of carbon an acre. That's just not worth it for them to go do. I'm not saying that, there aren't people out there doing great work on very small acreages. With
It's a
time,
business model. They have to make some money. For sure.
right, and I think last year, the 2024 carbon contract price was $24.
Okay.
It's gonna be higher for 2025. It's gonna be higher for 2026. It's gonna be higher for 2027. It's only going up. I mean, if you've got the government willing to pay $800 a ton
All right.
to turn carbon dioxide into rocks, surely they'd pay $60 a ton for cows to turn grass into carbon in the soil.
You'd think.
I mean, our day's coming. It's gotta come. I believe that. I believe the carbon price will be significantly higher than $25 a ton for these grassland storage contracts in the few years to come. Like it's
I look
if you
forward
if
to
you
it.
heard me say carbon gold rush,
Mhm.
I mean, it's still there.
Yeah.
It's still going. I just haven't really talked about it in a while because it's other important shit going on. But
I
hey,
look forward to them figuring it out and getting a model dialed in that works for hopefully everybody to some degree. Because it'd be nice to have that out there, iron in the fire, another revenue stream. I don't know how significant it would be, but everything helps at this point.
I don't want to talk numbers, but
Yep.
yes, but the carbon when the carbon check shows up, it's very
It's a good
nice.
day.
It's a good day.
Good,
It's a
man. That's
good day.
awesome. That's good. Everybody, yeah, we all need something like that, man. Putting in this effort, pulling up, doing the poly wire every day and all the things, it'd be nice to get another little check for that, certainly, or a big check for that.
Yeah. So you said you've only been there about 5 years. What did you do before you came to the ranch?
Man, I've been a jack of all trades, master of none. Prior to this, I was in Paris, Texas, which is where I grew up. And my stepfather and I had a coffee roasting business. And we had a little listening room concert, a little kind of space downtown, and just did that for a while. And unfortunately, he ended up getting brain cancer and passing on. But just during it, the timing of it was very interesting, right as that happened and that door was shutting, then my parents decided that they had had enough of the Texas heat and wanted to go somewhere was a little drier for a little while and moved to New Mexico and asked if I would like to come and fill this vacancy over here. And I was, sure, absolutely. Had no designs on being a cattle person, or anything like that. Came out here and my dad had left I think I had 5 cows and a really nice bull that were just left here to kind of learn how to take care of. And then, through that process of working with them, and I started watching Greg Judy. And, I think Greg Judy is a wonderful stepping stone into this industry. If you're looking to kind of get some basic information, see somebody that's very inspiring and inspired with what they do. I just love hearing him talk about forage and stuff like that. He just gets excited about it, and so through YouTube University, starting with Greg Judy and then moving on, kind of caught fire, decided that we wanted to put some real effort and some animals out here and went bought a conventional cow herd, kind of went through those genetics a little bit, started rotating them and doing all those sorts of things. Saw some benefits to the land. Then we took away all their crutches, decided to take away the wormers, take away the vaccines, except for, the tetanus. When we ban something, we'll give something a tetanus vaccine. And that was a little bit of we didn't have a wreck doing that, but we definitely had some heavy culling. And that's we did that for a couple of years. And then the last couple of years, we've kind of starting to get our program pretty dialed in, got some good genetics to work with, and I'm feeling good what I'm doing out here. So the dung beetles return. We've got dung beetles everywhere now. It's just really cool to kind of see some management choices have these really nice, exponential type of effects. It's really cool.
Let's talk about when you took away the inputs from your herd.
Sure.
You
Absolutely.
said you had to cull heavy,
Yeah.
and I think that's kind of everybody's experience. And what I'm curious about is, like, how heavy in terms of percentage was your cull of, what wasn't going to perform under your new program, under a new low input program.
It wasn't
And
insane, man. It wasn't crazy. But go ahead.
I think what I'm getting at is, like, let's just say the bottom 10 or 15% of the herd that require inputs to perform where the rest of them are, they're the ones
Right.
that are costing you the money.
Yep. And they're gone now without
And
those.
and once you get rid of that 20%, once you cull that bottom 20% out that requires all those crutches, the remaining few will will do a lot better without the crutches.
Absolutely, man. That's been our experience out here, man. I have never once looked back. I've seen nothing but, benefits to removing those crutches. We did have to call, but like I said, we didn't like lose half our herd or come up open 50%, or anything like that through that transition. A little more heavy than we have to do now. But it's just been great. It's been really cool to build that faith, knowing we don't need those pharmaceuticals, that these animals and everything are designed to be able to do this on their own. And it's just our culture over the last 50 years that have been telling us that we have to have these things to be successful.
So I got a little story.
I'm all ears.
You know, I love having haters more than I love having fans.
You
Because
have thicker skin than me, my friend.
some of those haters will follow you around, and you get to live in
Yeah,
their head rent free. Like,
sure.
they're because they follow you around on social media, they make, they're trying to troll me on social media.
Yeah.
Bring it on, please.
Yeah.
That just increases my engagement. Like,
Yeah.
please troll me on social media. I'm a big kid. I can take it. Not going to name any names. Don't know if he listens, but there's a gentleman I've known for probably 10 or 15 years.
Okay.
He sells feed for Purina. Okay. Something you got to know about.
Hmm.
Well, I went down to listen to, gosh, I think it was Steve Campbell speak. And then just a couple days later, I got to listen to Alejandro Carrillo.
Beautiful. That was in your Oklahoma, Texas tour, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. So I posted a couple pictures on Instagram. Like, I think one of the slides Steve had was talking about how feeding grain affects genetic and epigenetic fertility in cattle.
Mhm.
Posted that slide on Instagram. Probably didn't even put much of a caption up there.
Right. Jumped all over it, did he?
He said, well, we've got research that shows the exact opposite. I got a meeting. There's a producer meeting that you should come to, and we'll show you research that says the exact opposite of what you're saying. And then he goes on to post that, like, this regenerative crap doesn't work because he had a client that 2 years ago took his conventional herd just all natural, and they had a huge wreck.
Mhm.
So he said, then that crap doesn't work. So we went back to what we were doing, and everything's fine. I said, well, that makes perfect sense. I can tell you why you had a wreck when you took that high input herd that's been bred for high input, high energy feed, lots of inputs and lots of drugs for the last 20 years. You pull the rug out from under them. Yeah, you're going to have a wreck.
For sure.
It takes perseverance to stick with it, though.
Yeah, it's not pretty, man. It can be a little hard, but it wasn't too of a ugly experience for us. Nothing that was shocking. We were primed and ready and kind of expected some fallout. But like I say, man, I'm not looking back. It just makes so much more sense to not be propping all these animals up and adding all these pharmaceuticals and then seeing the feedback, watching the dung beetles come back and forth. Like, we stopped worming 3 years ago. Took a year before I saw my first dung beetle. And then they were very intermittent. Then last year we started seeing quite a few, man. Like, they were pretty, I wouldn't say ubiquitous, but very common. But now when I go out there this year, I'm talking 70% of my cow patties if they're 3 days or older, have like, evidence of excavations and all that. And it's just really cool to see. It's such an integral part of what we're doing out here. Sometimes it was a little bit of a transition for me initially because when I first started, we were using the fly meds and the herd would be covered in flies, and you go dump some fly meds on it. And then for what, 4 or 5 days, they look good and fly free and stuff like that. But then they just come back. And so after getting some experience of seeing that was just a very minor temporary fix, took all that stuff away and okay, so we have some flies now, but it doesn't bother me at all to see some flies on a cow. That's part of being a cow.
Yeah. I mean, there's a big difference between a cow being covered with flies and getting fly strike on the eyes and ears and, and suffering
Yeah.
and having 15 flies on their horns and around their eyes. Like,
Right.
I don't need my cows to have 0 flies on them.
Right.
I need them to be below the threshold where they are bothered by the flies and it's hurting animal performance. If they can't eat because they're swatting flies, that's when the problem starts. If the flies are sucking blood and hurting gains, that's a problem. 20 or 30 flies on an animal, I'm not going to get concerned.
Yeah. We have probably more than that in the summer, in the heat of summer out here. Like I say, man, when we took the fly medicine away, I'm not weighing my animals daily. We don't have a scale out here or anything like that, but I just didn't see any sort of significant backtracking as a result of it. I'm sure they'd probably be a little fatter if we dumped fly medicine on them once a month, like they say to do or whatever, but it's just not worth it to me.
And, kind of back to the discussion we had about manure. Okay. Where the gain studies about flies, where are they coming from? They coming out of feedlot or are they coming out of a pasture?
Right. Mhm.
I mean, w- we can't, we got to stop looking at these things like, okay, we're going to study how a corn seed grows in sterile growing medium that we put all the nutrients in. Okay, that's great. Show me where that sterile environment exists in nature. It
Right.
doesn't.
It's
You
not.
show me where the conditions in that feedlot pen exist in nature for the flies.
Right.
Doesn't. Doesn't.
And in those papers you were reading and going back to manure, did they ever associate a value to NPK on like just a regular range cow patty as opposed to one that's handled, in confinement and stuff? Like, are the values differently?
Um, I would assume they would be. The
I would
3
too.
granted, this was years ago, and I haven't looked at this data in a while, but from what I remember, they completely like, ignored anything about, like, manure falling on the ground or urine falling on the ground. It was all, like, confinement pit type studies because, then they're quantifying it because reduction is science.
Right.
Gotta break everything down so we can quantify it. And what we've quantified doesn't work in the real world, even though we think it does.
Right. I would assume that the NPK would be different if those animals eating grain as opposed to forage only. It seems, I don't know what they would be and what, if the N or the P or the K or all three would be different, but it seems like it would be definitely different.
I mean, I would definitely agree with that, the output is gonna be different based on different input.
Mhm.
Um, but it almost seemed like there should be a range. There should be some kind of a range that, nitrogen is this many pounds from the low end to the high end and, say 15 to 50, but most of the time you're gonna find around 20.
Right. Right.
You know, well, and like I said, the data that I used, imperfect, flawed, but is the best I could find because I don't think anybody's actually been able to do the research of what the NPK value is of the manure in the pasture because you can't collect it.
Right.
And it's not just that, it's also, that the manure feeds dung beetles, right? So it's
Okay.
not just NPK and carbon in the manure. It's not just, nitrogen and whatever else in the urine. There's also bypass microbes, there's bacteria, there's all sorts of things that have a wonderful synergistic effect with the soil microbiome and soil life that we have zero understanding of.
Absolutely. That NPK is a reflection of like reductionist science. You got to have something you can measure. But yeah, it doesn't tell probably a very, very small amount of the story.
But I think it's illustrative that, like, okay, the difference is I can go put $50 an acre of cost into this property to increase the fertility, or I can get somebody with cows to come in and they'll pay me $50 an acre for a month to graze their cows here, and I'll have roughly the same volume of NP and K, but it's natural and it's bioavailable.
Right, right. For sure.
Yeah. I mean, because look, neither one of us has any control over how much money we make.
Right.
I mean, we can only control what we spend.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And if I can spend zero to get that fertility benefit, or if I can spend negative money, I mean, somebody's giving me money to get that fertility, why wouldn't you do that versus writing a huge check to the sprayer man and the chemical company?
I'm with you. I'm with you. So my kind of main thing that turns me on about all this is the grazing side of things. Is that where you're at, or do you like the animal husbandry, or the combination of the both? Or
I like the grazing, I like the peace, um, and stockmanship.
the
Gosh,
grazing that you the grazing that you do on your place, which is, from what I understand after listening, is mostly natives, correct? Big Blue and those sorts of things. Is it totally different than? I mean, isn't Bermuda considered a turf grass? Isn't that what it's considered?
I would consider Bermuda a lawn grass. Uh,
Lawn grass, right? So if
it's
you have some
lawn.
rain and 30 days pass, you can grow some more Bermuda grass. Out in
Yep.
your context, though, with those natives, what's your approach when you're grazing them? Do you like to take half and leave half, or what do you like? What do you like to do out there?
I like to take a little bit less than half.
Okay.
Um, I like to take a little bit less than half and leave a little bit extra stockpile,
Okay.
for a couple reasons. Some of that is, continual, building fuel load in places so we can carry a
Sure.
fire. Some of it would be, like my grazing strategy for the last 4 years has been different because I've had to leave stockpile because I've overwintered a cow herd. Not overwintering anything winter 24, 25. So I could push a more aggressive grazing schedule and not plan to leave near as much stockpile for next year other than where I want to burn and put more bucks back in my billfold, for this grazing season.
Right. Right.
Um, I I think the way I want to answer your question is like grass growth. So like with Bermuda grass, you can keep grazing as long as you get rain. It's just going to
For
keep
sure.
growing. A
Yeah.
lot like the fescue guys, further east of me. I'll grow grass whenever I get moisture,
And then it just shut.
and then it just quits.
Yeah.
So, how much grass am I going to have this year? I'm probably going to be at least. I'm probably going to be looking at sub 2,000 pounds an acre average across the ranch.
I'm envisioning a big thunderstorm coming your way, just like last year, man. You growing lots of grass. I'm in the process. Of course, we have mostly varieties of Bermuda out here, coastal. We got a little bit of hay sprig, Tifton 85 out here. We have some Alicia, but I'm real inspired by warm season natives down here, like some gamma grass and some big blue stem and Indian grass. And I'm in the process of building what I call my native grass nursery in my yard, in the hopes that I can like spread the seed or whatever, whenever the seed heads come up, see if it just kind of spreads through osmosis being around it or something. But I think I'm going to have to adjust how I graze things. I think I'm going to have to like give those natives a long rest after they've been impacted, and just might be a little bit different.
So a couple of the grasses you mentioned, like big blue and Indian grass,
Hmm.
I'm pretty good at growing those.
Okay.
Um,
Tell me about them, because I've never even seen them and that I'm aware of.
I am not great at growing eastern gamma grass. My
Is
dad
that a
has a
moisture
patch behind
thing?
his
Or?
house, but there isn't any on the ranch.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it really won't grow here or if I just have it figured out like the magic management formula to encourage it to grow.
Right.
Um, so Indian grass and big blue, I really noticed like in 2015, I had plenty of Indian grass and big blue after the wildfire.
Those are like 7 and 8 foot grasses too, right? They get really tall, right?
Yeah. So after the wildfire, my Indian grass and big blue stem has increased dramatically. Um, and in my experience, a 45 to 60-day rest in late season is very critical for big blue stem and Indian grass.
And
They
you're
are
not taking more than half. You're taking 40%, 30%, something like that.
right. They're very intolerant of overgrazing.
Okay.
Like if you overgraze 1 year, it might be you might set your big blue and your Indian grass back 2 or 3 years.
Wow. Okay.
But once it heads out, you can graze it to dirt once it heads out.
How does it stockpile? Does it get real rank? Like Bermuda, you cannot stockpile swarm seed. I mean, you can, but you got to really offer some protein supplement or something for them to do okay on it. What about the big blue and stuff? Is it stockpile pretty good?
But same story. Like
Same story.
none of the prairie grasses are really gonna cure and store protein well, as standing stockpile.
Okay.
We're a lot more dependent on forbs.
Yeah.
Okay, weeds for all you farm types. We're a lot more dependent on forbs for protein than grass. I
Mhm.
It blows my mind when I see somebody going like, "I'm gonna go spray my pasture so I can grow more grass because I want to get rid of that pigweed and kochia." Like,
Right. Right.
you go right ahead. That's the dumbest thing I've heard in the last 6 hours because pigweeds and kochia are excellent, excellent cow feed. And you're
Absolutely.
gonna go
Especially,
spend
yeah.
and you're gonna go spend $30 or $40 an acre to get rid of the best feed that you have in that pasture because you want more grass?
Right. Right.
That makes sense. Makes sense. So it's like my friend Tim that like he had a neighbor with a bunch of failed wheat last year. It was full of crabgrass, pigweeds, and kochia, and the wheat was adjusted to make 20. He found a chopper, silage chopper, and he put up like 7,000 tons of it for nothing, and it tested at 13.5% protein.
That's good cow feed, man, right there.
Like, yeah, he laughed all winter when he was feeding that ration, all winter. And I would too.
For sure. For sure.
And then I have another neighbor that had the same exact problem in a wheat field and in an oat field. They're separated by less than a quarter mile. They're right on my south fence line.
Mhm.
Well, crabgrass, pigweeds, and kochia. What does he do? He called the airplane. Airplane came out and sprayed his fields, and then he cut and baled them and sold the hay. And I just can't help but think about how many thousands of acres in northwest Oklahoma and south central and southwest Kansas that got sprayed last year because they were full of pigweeds, crabgrass, and kochia. And then we get down into fall and everybody's screaming about the price of hay that it's so high. Like, oh God,
Right.
hay's $300 a ton. How much good cow feed did you go spray out of your wheat field? Because you wanted the insurance check that you'd get from cutting 20 bushel wheat.
When you say your cows eat their pigweed, do they eat the actual foliage of it, or do they wait for that seed head in like August and September and then munch on those grains? Because that's what mine do.
Generally, what I see them do from about first to mid June and
Hmm.
on is first pass, they'll come through and strip the foliage off.
Okay.
And then second pass, they come back and they eat the stalk and the branches.
Okay. Interesting.
But generally, like I'll watch them, you move the cows, you go watch what that first group is going to run to go eat.
Uh,
They're going to eat they're going to eat kochia and pigweeds, and they're stripping the leaves and the berries right off of it and running to the next one. The cows that are last through the gate, what are they like slowly walking over to eat? Sometimes they'll go right to that pigweed and eat the stem of that pigweed after somebody else has already gotten all the good stuff off of it. So there's times I'll turn 'em into a pasture John, and I'll watch them not eat grass for a day and a half. They'll just run around and go eat weeds. They'll go eat all the, they'll go eat all the little buttercup flowers and the clovers and the scurvies and everything else and the crabgrass or pigweeds and the kochia, and go eat the yucca flowers. And then they're like, "Oh, well, now all the good shit's
Grass.
gone. We'll go eat some of this big blue stem."
Gotcha. Gotcha. They're not running towards the big blue.
I
They love the gamma. I have a friend who has transitioned her farm, 70 acres or so, back into natives. She nuked it with glyphosate because she wanted to see it as she's a little bit older than me, and she wanted to, in her lifetime, see this restoring prayer. And in her mind, that included glyphosate. That's what the NRCS was trying to say and everything. But sure enough, she's created a really nice little prairie after about 6 or 7 years, man. And she's got gamma grass out there, big, huge, 5 foot tufts, they're 5 foot wide. And her approach with them is to let the cows, eat almost half of them, kind of like you, and then move them on. But it's pretty cool to see her cattle, how fat they are with her diversity. She got a native prairie mix. So she's got all the Maximilian sunflowers, the gamma grass, the ragweed, all the forage, and stuff. And her cows are very fat. It's cool to
Cool,
see.
cool. Uh, yeah. So we were, one of the things that keeps coming up, and one of the things I want to talk about is not enough bodies, not enough people.
Okay.
And been I've had a couple of conversations, with some of my friends in the last week about this, and I think you and I were talking about it a little bit, before I mashed the record button. Um, so the last 2 days have been burning. Like my burn association, they're actually off doing one today that, we had this scheduled. So needed to get this done so I have content for next week.
Okay.
Went did one yesterday. And we're a little light on crew. And I think 3 of us had to run our pickups single-handedly. And I mean,
That's one hand on the wheel, one hand with the something out the window. It's a spraying.
one hand on the wheel, one hand on the gear lever, one foot on the clutch, one foot on the brake, one foot on the gas, and one hand out the window with the sprayer. I mean, and you're one guy,
Yeah.
having to drive, navigate, rough, rough, uneven ground. You got to watch in front of you. You got to watch behind you. You got to watch right beside you. You got to pay attention to where the other units are on the line. You got 2 freaking radios that are screaming at you all the time.
Sounds very high energy, man.
It is. It can be. It's also one of those things that, when you've been doing it for 37 years, it's just kind of like, all right, it's just another day. But yeah, so we're shorthanded trying to get burns done.
Mhm.
And I was thinking, um, because it was an hour down there to the Manure Ranch yesterday for the burn. And it was an hour back. So you get a little bit of time to think. And I think about how many times we've come up shorthanded at a branding, how many times we come up shorthanded working cows. And it's not because people don't show up when you call. There just aren't enough people to call anymore.
I don't know who to call.
And so I think it all goes back to Earl Butts, get big or get out.
Right.
Get big or get out. That's the way agriculture's going. Okay, great. So we replace as much human labor as we can with machines because machines are more efficient and machines are cheaper. Machines don't take sick days. They don't
Right.
need to go to court. They don't have baby mama drama, right? They're reliable. Okay, we'll replace all the men with machines. Well, first let's replace all the mules and the horses and the oxen. We'll replace them with tractors.
Right.
We'll replace all the tractors with bigger tractors because each tractor needs a guy to operate it. And if you have 5 100 horsepower tractors, you need 5 guys. If you have one 500 horsepower tractor, you need one guy. Pretty simple. Let's just buy bigger tractors.
Mm.
The problem is, as we get bigger, we get less because they are making more land. So one thing we're not making more of on this planet is we're not making more land. Okay, Yeah, there's some here and there, but by and large, the human population's need to occupy land is far outstripping the planet's ability to create more land. That's the moral of the story.
Right.
We're getting more and more crowded. We have to keep producing more on less, with less, that cost less, with less labor in order to satisfy demand. And I think we've passed a breaking point where we've depopulated agriculture too much. I think we reached that point in this country and have gone screaming past it. And you're like, well, we're trying to get these burns done. Did we have enough people? We had everybody that showed up. How many was enough? We got it done safely and it didn't get away. So we had enough. How much equipment was enough? Exactly what we had. Because if we had less, it might not have worked, right? So it's like, what's the least amount of equipment we can get by? What's the least amount of manpower we can do one of these burns with? I don't want to find out. I want to find out how many people I can get excited to come out and help do range burning. And I've had I get offers of people that they say they want to come help. And sorry, I don't know how to tell somebody that lives 2 or 3 hours away, hey, there may or may not be a burn in 3 days. I won't know until that morning.
It's hard to take the burn on the calendar with weather and all that other stuff, I imagine.
Yeah, a lot have been, several have been called off because of the last minute weather change, last minute forecast change. I I don't know how to let people know of where our group's going to be burning and how to get that word out so we can get more people to help. We've got all these, government and NGOs like the Nature Conservancy, Wild Turkey Federation, Chickadee Checkoff, Pheasants Prayer, Quail Forever, these organizations. They're like, we want to help. We want to help. What do you need? What do you need? What do you need? And we're like, we need bodies. And like, well, we can't give you any. What else do you need? Radios, I guess.
Right.
It's like, why can't you just have a crew of 20 people that when it's burn season in Red Hills, we move them to the Red Hills. And when it's burn season in Texas, they go down to Texas and they just kind of rotate through the country and help people do prescribed burns. Because that's a lot of times what the biggest holdup is. Lack of burn culture, lack of knowledge, and lack of help.
Yeah.
If we had trained groups that would go around and do that simply to assist, that could go a long ways. I mean, I would love it. It would be pretty cool to have a full-time job to where I could go around and help people burn their pasture, help them write burn plans and do that advice. I can't take that job because I already got my own thing that I don't want to give up. It's a pretty easy gig, right?
It's heavy on, it seems like the potential for something to go wrong is very much there. It seems like it's heavy on needs on equipment, heavy needs on information and just wisdom and knowing how to do it, and not enough bodies. It's hard to kind of combat with all that. Plus, everybody's so damn busy, man. Everybody's working and doing everything. It's hard to, when you're spending 40, 45 hours a week working or something, and then you have a day on the weekend or something. If you're not super passionate about doing that, you kind of want to compress or something. You just have a lot of hurdles to jump over to make this happen. Sounds like.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I think if we could just have some more exposure and education onto the benefits of it. I'm very much intimidated by it, man. For whatever, I've just never seen it. The idea of like a wildfire getting away from me personally and impacting my neighbors is just terrifying for me. But I would love to. I think my pastures would benefit greatly from it. I've told you about the thatch on one of them. I'd be very curious to see what would happen just to burn that, see what happens for a year. I love that thatch. It gives me some drought insurance and stuff, but what happens if you burn it? I don't know till I do it, so.
Everything's experimental, John.
Absolutely. And I'm down. I've got a tolerance risk for risk for tolerance more than most people, but the fire thing, I just still haven't taken the leap yet. But maybe you could come down to Texas and show us how to do it, man. Or if you were able to schedule get with God and determine the weather and schedule a fire, let me know and I'll come up there and be an extra body and try not to get in the way.
If I could mail order the weather, I would.
For sure.
Generally, I would say the third week of March to the second week of April is, if somebody can be here in the Red Hills at the end of March, like the third week of March on, you'll get to go on a fire.
Are you burning stockpile at that point? Seems like everything. I mean, here, I don't know what's going on in your context, but here we're getting rain and it's green grass coming up and everything. Is that kind of the time of year if you want to do it? A little moist out and
Well, okay. So we're going to be looking at, like, there's multiple different reasons to burn, and why you would want to burn can also determine
when
when to
yeah,
burn.
that makes sense.
So a lot of the burning that's going on here is we're still doing reclamation. We're still
Okay.
trying to get the trees knocked back to a point where they're in maintenance phase. So
Those are the
it's
cedars.
yes, eastern red cedar. So it's a combination of doing a lot of mechanical clearing and doing fire. And once you get them kind of knocked back to a point, you get your canyons cleaned off, and you get your reclamation fires done, then you can switch up a different management program. I'm not saying that
Understood.
fire completely comes out of the management toolbox. I'm just saying
Right.
that the purpose of fire in the management toolbox goes from reclamation to maintenance eventually. That's the goal. Because
Gotcha.
when you're in the reclamation phase, you're grazing to build stockpile, you're cutting trees, and you're trying to get that thing burned 3 times in 10 years.
Right. Right.
Get rid of your seed source, get rid of those ones that are gonna come back immediately, get those burn off, and keep pressing. And then you can move into where you're getting into maintenance, where you're getting into the steep canyons and you're going after the original seed sources and you're really cleaning out things that haven't been cleaned in 2 or 300 years maybe.
Wow.
And then you're getting back to, like, once every 7, once every 10 years fire return frequency, and that's what I think is a little more historic for here.
Right.
Um, so if you what they're learning over in the Flint Hills of Kansas, they have a totally different burn culture, and I don't wanna say anything bad about it, especially because I have a platform and those guys
Sure.
don't. They could definitely use some more organization, but I think that there's gonna have to be some guys that won't age out of the program before they can have any changes in how they burn in the Flint Hills.
Right.
They also have some issues with smoke management because if you burn 2 million acres pretty much every year with kind of the same weather, the smoke's gonna go one place, and you're also gonna start promoting different kinds of plant communities.
Okay. That makes sense.
So the successive burning in basically the first 2 weeks of April that they've done in the Flint Hills for close to 100 years now. So, have you ever heard of something called Sericea lespedeza?
Of course.
Yep,
So
goats love it.
nitrogen fixing thing, right?
Great goat food, tremendous nitrogen fixer. Cows don't eat it.
Okay.
When you burn in the spring, and burn in the spring, and burn in the spring, and do that every year, and double stock your pastures for 90 to 100 days, then get the cows out, it encourages a lot of Sericea lespedeza to grow. If you burn in August and September, you can kill Sericea lespedeza. But
Mm,
if you burn in April, you make it mad and you stimulate it.
gotcha. Gotcha.
Similarly, like elm trees. We have a lot of elm trees. A lot of people call them piss elm trees. You burn those right now, nothing happens. You make it mad, it'll grow more. You burn it in August, September, and it's gone.
Yeah, it makes total sense, man. I can see that for sure.
So the reason, back to the reason why we're burning in late March and early April,
Okay.
we turn our date to exit winter dormancy is generally April 15th. I've seen it happen in March. I've seen it happen in May. Generally, April 15th is where soil temperatures and moisture levels get, and we'll start growing cool season grass. The best day to burn is the day before that happens.
Okay.
That's the best day to burn
Right.
because it's the in winter drought. You get a lot more, you get better kill on cedar trees.
Mhm.
And it's also kind of has to do with timing of being able to graze cattle because we want to turn out here in this country now, 1st of May.
Right.
We want to be turning out and going to grass.
Yeah.
So you back up 30 days and that's the last day you should be burning. So that's going to be that's going to be the end of April to burn. What's our burn window? Second week of March to the end of April. Generally, there's guys burning today. We're burning yesterday. But, they have a stocking plan that takes that into account. So there's that. It's more difficult from a forage chain management perspective and a cattle production perspective to figure out how you're going to burn in July, August, or September.
That sounds terrifying around here. It's so dry.
But it's not. So
Okay.
And-
Switch me up.
And maybe where you're at's a little bit different. So if you talked about Paris and you said Northeast Texas, I get the feeling that you are east of Dallas.
Yes, sir. About 90 miles to Dallas, for sure.
And you're north of Interstate 40, but you're south of the Red River.
Yep. I'm in between I-20 and I'm just north of I-20.
So what you're thinking about is your precipitation in July, August, September. You're not thinking about the atmospheric humidity during that time of year. So how humid is it where you are in June, July, August?
Very humid typically, man. Pretty humid.
Very sticky. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's, do you know what a red flag warning is for weather? What the conditions are for a red flag warning?
Wind and dryness, right? Typically.
So it's going to be temperature over 80 degrees and relative humidity below 20%.
Okay.
And there's often a high wind component to it too.
Yep.
There's several other things that go into it. There's the Haynes index goes into it. There's also wildland fuel moisture index that goes into it with different fuel loads, between fine, coarse, and heavy fuel loads.
Right.
What their moisture window is, blah, 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 blah. Okay. What people need to know about a red flag day is 80 degrees, 20% humidity.
Okay.
You're above 80 degrees and below 20% humidity, your spot fire risk goes up dramatically.
Right.
And the distance goes up dramatically with the wind. Like I've had a 750-yard jump. 750 yards with 12 miles an hour wind.
Holy cow, man. That's terrifying.
12 mile an hour wind, 12 mile an hour wind, 10% relative humidity.
Just embers from what's burning, got up in the air and blew and traveled 750. Is that the way that works typically, I guess?
Yeah. And that day was 55 degrees. So it was the dryness.
Right.
It's the dryness. Now, if you're burning on a day where it's 90 and you've got 80% humidity, your spot fire risk is almost nothing.
Okay. Interesting.
And another good reason to burn during quote growing season, late summer, is a cedar tree has to hit 140 degrees before it's going to combust. You get the needles to 140 degrees, the oil volatilizes, it burns. Okay. How hard is it to get that tree to 140 degrees when when the air temperature is 90 as a high during the day versus coming out of winter when the air temperature is maybe 50?
Right.
I mean, it's the difference between trying to raise at 40 degrees and raising at 90 degrees.
Right, for sure.
You're already closer to the ignition temperature of the material when you're burning in summer.
Yep.
You're farther away from a humidity danger point. And generally, like the wind here, February, March, April, that's some of the windiest months.
Right. Yeah.
But if we look at June, July, August, if we start looking at that, like a good weather window to burn. And that's going to be humidity first, wind second, temperature third.
Right.
I want my humidity to be fairly high in relation to my fuel load moisture. If your fuel's dry, high humidity, you're okay.
It's counterintuitive for me. I would have thought it would be like, I was always thinking about the dryness of the fuel load, but that makes sense.
I mean, the heat and the dryness of the fuel load, that helps the fire carry, but the humidity is kind of what's going to dampen It'd be
Yeah, it's
huge.
suppressant for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, yeah, makes sense.
And the wind, I I would much rather burn on a day when it's 90 degrees with 50% humidity and 10-mile-an-hour wind in July than a 55-degree day with 18 miles an hour wind and 21% humidity. Like,
Okay.
that's a spicy day. That's a spicy day.
So what you're telling me is it's very multifaceted.
Yes.
That's cool, man. I'd love to participate. Do you know any firebugs that I need to be paying attention to or anything like that to kind of, get some more information on it?
Well, if you're farther west, like out towards Edwards Plateau or over in Hill
Mhm.
Country or in the Panhandle, probably could come up with a resource for you pretty quick. I'll see what I can do after we get off here about finding a resource or a prescribed burn association close by. Um, Texas Grazing Land Coalition,
Mhm.
you know them?
Oh yeah, very, very familiar.
Great folks. And I I don't know for a fact, but I would guess that Texas has Texas Prescribed Burn Association, some kind of a statewide organization help coordinate,
I'm sure they
member
do.
associations.
Right.
One of the first prescribed burning associations that I'm aware of that was in the United States was Edwards Plateau Prescribed Burn Association, and that was
Okay.
Dr. Butch Taylor put that one together.
Very cool.
I don't know how long they were operating, but they were operating for years as of 2008 when we heard them talk, and that's why we did our PBAs because oh well they can do it in Texas. I guess it worked down there. Let's do it here too. Um, but
Seems
yeah,
like you can clear some government resources for this, man. But you're telling me it's like a totally volunteer type thing. I mean, I'm sure some companies and stuff might donate stuff to you, but you don't get any sort of support from the government or anything around these things, right?
there's programs coming that'll pay people to defer grazing so they can burn. Um,
Okay.
and I've got to get moving out of here because I do have another
Sure.
appointment.
Man. I'm with
A
you.
little late getting to.
It's
Uh,
breakfast time.
they'll wait. Um, so for a long time, like you go into NRCS and you say, I want to get in this prairie chicken program and help cut trees. And I'm like, okay, great. You write up the contract, you sign it, and like, you got to burn twice in 10 years. You say, cool. You go do your tree work and you come back and say, all right, I'm ready to go burn. They're like, well, get that done and we'll pay you. Like, oh, you're going to make me burn, but you've got no resources to help me plan it, to help me pull it off,
Yeah.
but you're going to make me do it. And my dad has been screaming about that for 10 years. And every
Okay.
chance we get that we get in front of, any of these government folks, like, and I don't want to say anything bad about any of the government folks that I work with or have worked with, because they're all fantastic. It's just their employer sucks.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with
Um, they get it, but they're like, hey, my hands are tied. If I want to come help you burn, I have to take a personal vacation day. And that's a big ask. So like you've got to, and it also puts them in an interesting position at NRCS because you've got your district conservationist telling you, yeah, if you want this money to do this practice, you got to burn, but we
Right.
can't help you burn.
You're on your own.
And then for his boss to say, yeah, well, if you want to go do that, you got to take a personal day off.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to some extent, it's also like why you don't see a lot of producers at meetings and seminars and conferences because we got to pay to be there.
Yeah.
Our employer's not paying us to go for our education. We're not getting paid time off. It's not a vacation for us. We're paying for it out of our own pocket.
For sure. And then paying somebody to take care of the farm.
Yep. Yep. I got to get going.
Yeah, man, enjoyed it, Brian. Thanks for the time today and the opportunity. And you made it easy for me. So thank you.
Oh, you made it easy for me too. Uh,
Awesome.
you're John Rhodes. Where can people find you if they'd like to contact you, get to know you more, or follow you on social media?
Sure, man. I'm just on the socials for now. If you want to follow me on Instagram, we are Broken Oak Farm. And on Facebook, it's John Rhodes. Hit me up. I'm always interested in finding some like minded community and talking grazing or whatever. I'm down.
All right. Great stuff, John. I appreciate your time today, bud.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. It's good talking to you, Brian. Good to meet you.
You too. All right, gang.
All right.
Have a great week.
Talk again sometime. See you.
See ya.
Bye.
Hey there. Thanks for sticking around to the end. Don't forget to follow me on social media at Red Hills Rancher. Don't forget video versions of the podcast are available on YouTube, Spotify, and many other players. You can submit guest suggestions through the contact form on my website, redhillsrancher.com. And don't forget, you can also come chat with me and other podcast fans on my Discord server. There's a link for that in the show notes and on my link tree. And lastly, if you found that this episode educational, enlightening, or just plain entertaining, please do me a huge favor and share the podcast with your friends. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week.